will come from me. If they have questions in the chat. Okay, we will wait for someone to comment, and then to make sure we are live, I think we are, and then we will kind of start going.
Okay.
So excited to have all of y'all in the midst of COVID and all the craziness going on.
Yeah. I feel like I'm like a little kid. I'm like, are people going to show up to my birthday party? Like,
okay, we are live. Alliance is commented. Okay, so we will give people a couple minutes to log on and then introduce all of y'all fabulous people and go from there. Okay, so I'm so excited about this first virtual SmashTALK that we've ever done. Life Beyond Your Eating Disorder, and we are hoping to do this into like a series kind of, just because we've gotten so many people to talk about like, you know, what happens kind of when you're in recovery and when you're recovered, like how do you still protect your recovery and like deal with issues that come up. So tonight joining us, I have the fabulous Allison Marek, who is a licensed clinical social worker. She's a certified Daring Way facilitator, and just an all-around fabulous eating disorder therapist. We have Malak Saddy, a non-diet dietitian, CEDRD, and just one of the funniest people probably I know. And then Sharon Maxwell, who is just a recovery queen, mental health advocate, fat activist, and just like truly an inspiration to me, and I know so many others. So we are beyond excited to have y'all here. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. A question we've gotten a lot in some of our virtual support groups we've been doing with the Alliance is intuitive eating, and just like how, kind of what is it, but also how do you know when you're ready for it in your like recovery journey? So Malak, I'm going to start with you on that one.
Sure. So I have a little way of like describing intuitive eating. I know, as we are all born with these intuitive eating skills. We are all born with the ability to identify our hunger, identify our fullness, to move our bodies in a fun way, to respect our bodies, and to find value in our health and our bodies rather than what society has deemed. And so I feel like intuitive eating is something that we're all born with, and diet culture, you know, we go through puberty and diet culture starts to come in, and society starts to tell us, hey, you know, don't listen to your body, listen to these arbitrary numbers and these facts, and come on over to this side. So we start to kind of dabble in it, and we kind of move away from listening to our bodies and being connected to it. And so, you know, when we start that intuitive eating journey, I really like want to encourage that this is something that we've done before. We know how to do, and our bodies are aware of that, but it's just reconnecting back to our bodies and starting that process of healing, and rebuilding that relationship with a more body acceptance and body neutrality. So that's how I would describe intuitive eating. And sorry, there was a second part, right?
Kind of how do you know when you're ready to like start trying that in recovery?
So I think, I mean, it's so hard, right? Because each person is so individualized, but I do believe that at any stage we can at least start learning about it. It can be really motivational and encouraging to see like, okay, this is what I want to work towards. So I think that at any point we can start to learn about it, but until we can truly identify those hunger and fullness cues and reject that diet mentality, then I think we can kind of start that process. Because without that, it's hard to trust our bodies when for so long we've been dieting and using, you know, I keep saying arbitrary numbers, but it's crazy random numbers that have, you know, led us to believe that this is that right way to do it. Whether that's through our weight or calories or whatever it might be. So yeah, I would just say it's kind of individualized, and like the way that I would start is by being able to kind of separate our healthy self versus the eating disorder, and kind of begin to kind of make those steps there. But I do believe it is something that everybody can do. Intuitive eating, I want to also recognize intuitive eating is a privilege to be able to do that. And not everybody can have that opportunity to have access to food and nutrition. But yeah, what do you guys think?
I think that I love everything that you said, Malak, especially in regard to privilege. Like, I have the privilege to say, what am I craving and what do I want? And I think that's really important to keep in mind. I also know that sometimes, like, getting to intuitive eating can be seen as like, oh, I'm done. Like, I'm an intuitive eater and I'm done. And I think especially, remember when I was program director at a treatment center, there's different dietary phases. And I constantly had to remind not only the clients, but the team as well, that intuitive eating is a practice. You don't just get there after exchanges and guidelines and then suddenly you're there. And especially during a pandemic, I've been an intuitive eater for 14 years now. And during this pandemic, I am like, what does my body want to do right now, or eat right now, or how does it want to move right now? So it is a continued journey and practice, and it's important to remember that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that something for someone speaking who's in recovery right now, in the beginning, I had this like picture painted of intuitive eating, kind of like what you were just saying, Allison, being as like this destination I would arrive at. And then like I would then be cured, right? And it was so vague and so like almost like it was like this myth or like this like fairy tale. And then also there was a part of me that also held on to it as people talked about, oh, your body, when you eat intuitively, will get to like your natural set weight point. And so I hung on to that as like, yes, so when I do this, it's my next diet. And in the very beginning of my recovery, I was like asking my dietitian, am I losing weight? Am I losing weight? Am I losing weight? Like, I have hunger and fullness cues now. Like, what's happening? And it's so like removing that it's not a diet. It's such a practice, and it's such a going back to being home in our bodies, right? And like listening to my body and being okay with like sitting with whatever's going on in my body. I think there's just like a lot of awareness, and it's just not awareness of my body, and it's not a destination, nor is it a diet. And so I had to kind of like grieve that process that like I wouldn't get like that ideal body from intuitive eating, that ideal body that I've had in my brain for so long.
Totally. I just want to add, two more things that I, like both of you guys said, that I was like, oh my gosh, this is such perfect, and tying it kind of all together. But I recently watched Michelle Obama's Becoming, the documentary, and like in between my like sobs and snot bubbles and writing all her quotes. And one of the things that I really loved and felt like this, it could be even applied in intuitive eating, is she was like, it's not that you're off track. You've always been on track. We just have to keep, like, how do we keep going? And so often, right, we say like, oh, I went off track of my intuitive eating, or so, like, no. You've always been there. You were there. And yeah, sometimes we may have had to put a pause to it, but you've always been on that path. How do I help keep you like moving forward? And then that second part is like in the book, in the intuitive eating book, my favorite phrase that she uses is for the most part. For the most part, I'm an intuitive eater. I just mentioned I'm going home to visit my family back in Michigan, and my family is Lebanese and makes the best food in the entire world. And I am not an intuitive eater when I am at home with my Lebanese grandma, with my sitzu, and she's making all this fresh bread and all these delicious foods that I don't get to have as often maybe as I would. So for the most part, I'm an intuitive eater. Sometimes I'm not, and that's okay.
I love that so much. And I feel like that kind of goes into the next topic. Like, we hear a lot about relapse, but I think there's also a difference with like a lapse versus a relapse. Like, I think like I talk about like recovery is not a straight path. Like, I didn't like choose to go to treatment and then like did everything perfect the rest of the time. Like, I had lots of ups and downs that I feel like most people do. So like, how do you kind of not beat yourself up after like a lapse in behaviors maybe, and kind of prevent it from turning in maybe to a relapse? Allison, I'll start with you this time.
I think relapse is a very clinical term. It's almost like diagnoses. Like, I think it's important to call a thing a thing. But also I don't think that we should put everything into boxes. And I think the most important question to ask is not, is this a relapse or a lapse? It's more, what do I need right now? And getting curious about what's happening for me, what's happening in my life, what's happening in my relationships, how am I coping, am I taking care of myself? And I do think that being able to ask those questions and get support earlier on in that struggle is obviously the most helpful. Every research study will show early intervention is key. But wherever you are, as far along that continuum of the amount of support that's needed, as far as the level of care might go, it really is about where are you at and what do you need?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
I love the way you put that. It's not like calling it a lapse or calling it a relapse is putting it in a box. And I remember getting so hung up in treatment over the difference between them. What is a lapse? How do I know the difference? And it's like, what do I need right now? Like, that is the ultimate question that you said. Like, what do I need in this moment to continue pressing forward in recovery? And remember, it's not linear. It's going to be messy.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. And I think like kind of with like, what do you need? I think like being honest with your team. I remember like slipping into a behavior at one point after doing really well and going to my therapist and being like, you're going to fire me, you're going to drop me as a client, like all this. And she's like, tell me what happened. And I told her and she laughed at me and she's like, this is like part of the process. Like, you know, like, let's learn from it. Let's see, like identify what led, oh, we lost Allison. She might still log back on. Like identify what led to it. And then like, you know, we can kind of prevent it from happening next time. I think we got her back. Maybe. I think we got you back.
Hey.
Yeah.
Have no clue what happened. Use the interruption.
So, okay, I believe health at every size should be incorporated into like every eating disorder treatment center, provider, everything like that. So if I might kind of start with you, Sharon, if you kind of want to explain like health at every size. And also I think like a lot of people run into problems with like, especially I know like my family even like trying to educate them on like, what is it? What is it not? You know, like all the myths surrounding it. Is that something you kind of want to maybe share and kind of explain maybe kind of your views on?
I can definitely jump in and then we can get more of the clinical side of it as well from Malak and Allison. But ultimately, when we say health at every size, we're not saying every single person at every single size is healthy. But what we are saying is that every single person at every single size is able to be healthy. Health is available for people at every size. And so in our society, unfortunately, which is founded and rooted in racism, actually, have subscribed to this concept that fat equals unhealthy and thin equals healthy, when it is just absolutely not correct. And I subscribed to that for the majority of my life, and then learned that actually on my pursuit to thinness was when I was the most unhealthy. And now when I am sitting at the weight that I'm at, which society at large, medical professionals have looked at me, and without getting labs, without finding out about behaviors, figuring out what my lifestyle is like, automatically slap a label on my body because I am living in a fat body, that means that I am then unhealthy. And it's just not accurate. And I also want to say that I have so much compassion for people who are hearing this maybe for the first time, or just beginning to hear this, because when I first heard this, I got all kinds of sass up in this self right here, and I was angry. My first response was anger, and that was my emotional response. I was like, you're looking at me and telling me that I can be healthy at this body, and it's not true. I have to be size X, la la la, and under this like number, and that's how I'm going to be healthy, as I'm sitting there with bald spots on my head and I've been passing out frequently, right? Like, no. So I think that it's just, there are so many that's just like super broad strokes, layman terms, right? But there are so there's research and so many different things to back that we can, which I think that maybe our other people can go into. But yeah, health is not determined by a size, and I think that's like what bare bones what it is.
Yeah,
I think you did a great job explaining that.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, I think the only thing I would like add to it, and then being aware as a health at every size provider, even looking at like if we're putting that claim on there, even sure that we can say it by the words that we say and the interactions that we may have with people, but also with the chairs that we have in our office, with our doorways. Is it accessible? Is it like making sure that all of those things are being considered if I'm going to sit here and call myself health at every size provider, you know? I kind of have been joking a little bit with my clients, but I've never sat in my home office chair as much as I have in these last, 6 months. And it has like little wings on them, like on the side. And I'm like, when I sit in it, it like kind of confines me. And I'm like, why would I do this to my, but never kind of realizing it right until we're sitting in these chairs or in these spaces that feels like, how does my body fit in it? And it's constantly touching, it's constantly touching my thighs. It's constantly reminding me I don't fit, I don't belong. So I think it's really important for us to consider those aspects too. Or even when people are talking about like, I can go to a thrift store, like I can't go to a thrift store. Like what thrift store would have, So I think that it's important to consider those aspects too. Going to an airport, being in an airplane. So.
Yeah. I guess if I can just jump back in again real quick and add on to that, I actively speak out in the environments that I'm in about the fat phobia that I see and that I experience as a person who is fat. And there are two things. One, when we talked about going to the doctor's office or going to a clinician's office, I recently made a post about this, but different things. My doctor, I found one out here in San Diego who is a health at every size doctor. I'm so grateful. And I walked in, and also in that office though, there are BMI charts on the wall, and there is not size inclusive seating. And so she does not make people get weighed of any size unless she needs it for specific things, for like she needs it for med dosing or what have you. But she practices these different things. And so then I walked in and I was like, hey, let's have a conversation. Like, you don't have seating that makes me feel comfortable. And I can sit and I, for my whole life, Malak, like you said, have sat in chairs and have worried if they're going to break. I've sat in them and been uncomfortable and been so aware of what it's felt of my body, because the chair is just, my body doesn't able to fit in it. And there are people who are living in much fatter bodies than mine, walking around and living in this society as well. And so there's that piece. And then also I went to a thrift store the other day, or a consignment shop, with my friend up in Encinitas, and we walked in and it was super cool shop. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to find a unique piece here. I was so excited. I walked around for like 45 seconds and I was like, this store is not for me. I know they're not going to have my sizes in here. And so I found this incredible pair of earrings and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting these. They're a statement. I love them. I walked up to the counter, paid for them. And as I paid for them, I asked the lady, I said, do you guys have size inclusivity here? And I don't even like to say plus size. I like to ask them if they're inclusive because that's ultimately the problem.
Yeah.
And she told me, no, we don't have plus size clients. And I said, I'm standing right here. And like, I'm right in front of you. And I would have purchased things had you had them.
Right.
And so she told me, it's one of those stores where you go and you bring your clothes. And she said, I don't buy them when people bring them in because I don't have plus size clients. I watched 3 other people who were like my size walk in and out of the store with nothing. And simply because they're not like including that. So it definitely is, it's a social justice issue as much as it is anything else. So 2 little answers.
Yeah,
Definitely. And I think, Sharon, you bring up such a, you go, Allison.
No, I was going to say, like, thank you both for sharing. And I think that, you know, as someone who is in a straight size body and who has struggled with body image, but it, like, as a clinician starting to do Hayes work, like, I had to walk through the discomfort of owning, like, I have hurt people in the past through behavior like that at some point. And how do I own that? How do I do my own work? And as a clinician, how can I sit in that space with a client? You can't do your own work with a client. That's irresponsible. I'm getting a little fired up now, you guys. I'm sorry, but that's irresponsible. But to be able to own and acknowledge, like, and hear an honest answer and be open to hearing an honest answer about, like, how does it feel in this space right now? Like, do you feel safe and what can I do? And to be able to hear the honest answer is vital. And I think around the education piece, I think that people with eating disorders are some of the coolest people, to tell you the truth, because they want to educate, they want to teach, and I know I'm making a generalization, but this is one generalization of people, about people with eating disorders that I will make, and you can take it or leave it with that one. But so often they take on all the responsibility of educating everybody.
Totally.
Like, and often it's really important for people in recovery to remind themselves, all you have to do is give someone a book. Yeah. Or here's a greater stretch, recommend the book and don't buy it for them. Like hand them an article, hand them a book, recommend a podcast. Like, you don't have to take on everyone's emotional labor.
Yeah, so the alliance with COVID switched to virtual support groups, and we have 2 on Mondays and Saturdays for individuals experiencing eating disorders, but on Wednesday nights we do friends and family. And we have just gotten so many parents, partners, loved ones that have come and been like, kind of like the same thing, like, I know nothing about eating disorders. Like, this is a journey. Like, I found out last week my daughter has one. Like, what do I do? Where do I go next? What's going to happen? And just being able to kind of like, for them to be surrounded by people that are going through it or have been through it and come out on the other side has been really just helpful. I know, just because it is like, I think there's so much like stigma and like myths surrounding eating disorders that like when you hear it, you like, everyone has a certain image in their mind, but then like learning past that is such a process.
I have a good helpful technique of this. If you guys, for those of maybe I'm like kind of all over the place, which I think like makes the story,
I love it,
goes along with. Sometimes I feel like I completely agree. I feel like I tell them my name is Malak, I'm Lebanese, and it's like, oh gosh, here comes the questions, and sometimes I feel like when it's really engaged, finding ways to kind of pull myself out of it, or if it's like they're just not listening to me. Sometimes I'll just be like, oh my God, did you see that? Did you see that bird? Like, you didn't see the bird. You missed the bird. It was so beautiful. It had blue wings and a yellow beak. And oh, I'm so sorry. You missed it. Gosh. Like, kind of just like something extremely random or something like, you know, and kind of like, because you were entrenched in this diet talk, you missed this beautiful thing. It didn't happen, but, you know, go along with it. But, you know, how do I kind of pull it away to be, you know, if it's so hard to redirect? Because I completely agree. It's not our responsibility to sit and educate everybody. So a bird, a butterfly, whatever you want, make it really beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it.
Make it really beautiful.
So a question someone actually sent in to us was, how do you keep choosing recovery when like life is chaotic? Like, obviously we're in a pandemic still, and like that has thrown like everyone's schedule is different, you know, like life just looks completely different. And like, how do you both keep the motivation, I think, but also like, I mean, kind of having to change maybe like how you are working on your recovery, whether it's like because things are going virtual, or, you know, maybe like with so many grocery stores, there were like shortages of stuff, things like that. Allison, I'm going to kick it off to you for this one.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hope is something that it's a word that's often, I think, thrown around and seen as very fluffy. You know, oh, be hope, have hope, but like really holding hope is all about like kind of having some glimmer of something to look forward to, having some belief that something can get better, that something can be obtained. And I think we are in the midst of this uncertainty right now. And at the same time, one thing that is certain that might not always feel certain is that your eating disorder will make everything that's happening right now even worse. And it whatever's on the other side of this, like it will, like, it's like sabotaging the hope of what could be. But at the same time, like I get that it's really hard. I mean, the world can feel really small right now. When the world starts to feel small, it can be really easy to go back. I've talked to people that have been like, you know, I got out of treatment and I've been back in and out of treatment, you know, forever. And I've been out for the past year. And now I feel like I'm back in treatment anyway, because I can't do anything. But really holding on to, okay, but what are those things that you can do? Because there's something, and looking for it. And what are things that you can hold out hope for? I think that's really, really important. And I think with the food shortages in the grocery store, I mean, I think practicing radical acceptance of what is really important in coping with all that, and recognizing that you're not alone in all that.
I love that. And I love that you brought the idea of hope, and that it sounds like such a like fluffy thing. And I feel like when I talk to people, I'm always like, I get you might not have hope right now. So like find people that are carrying that hope for you. Because I'm like, that's like kind of how I got through things. Like I had like fabulous team members and family and loved ones that like had hope for me. And so like bit by bit, I feel like I started like taking that hope from others. And that's kind of like what propelled me on my journey. So sometimes I'm like, it's okay if you don't have hope right now, but like find the people around you that do.
Yeah. I like to, when things are super chaotic and feel overwhelming, oftentimes I can go into I get paralyzed. That's my response to it, like the whole freeze. But one thing that I've decided is that I'm going to do the next manageable step, take the next manageable step. So if that's walking into the kitchen and choosing a snack and sitting in front of it. And also when things feel so overwhelming, oftentimes a meal that maybe it hasn't been overwhelming for the last like several months, all of a sudden has this heightened emotion with it, or sitting in front of it just because of the stress, be it the global pandemic or just other stressors that come into our world. And I sit in front of it and emotions go sky through the roof. It doesn't mean that I'm failing. And I'm going to sit there, sit with it, do what I can. And then I like to say, and someone at a treatment center said this to me one time, and I've just walked with it for so long, but leave each meal at the table, regardless of whether it feels like a success or feels like a failure. Get up, go on with my day, find those pieces of hope that Allison was talking about, whether it be through other people or my own, and literally just continue to live my life, and then approach the next thing as it comes and take the next manageable step. So when everything's huge and overwhelming, I just like really try to simmer it down to one little thing I can do.
Yeah. I love that so much, Sharon.
I completely agree. I mean, I think the theme that I'm hearing is like also carrying that, having that hope and being compassionate, you know, to ourselves. You know, this is, I mean, even as clinicians, we did not get a handbook on how to help clients in a pandemic. And so this is a learning process for everybody. I think the most common thing I've been hearing most often is like, well, I don't know if this is the right time for me to get the help. And, you know, there's always going to be things that can feel like it's never perfect. It's never going to be that perfect, you know, moment. And so why not take that leap of faith and give this a go? But I think, I love positive affirmations. If you ever saw my mirrors, you'd be like, are you okay? Because there's so many positive Post-it notes. And but I think those ones honestly have been really helpful. And I move one to the center, you know, each week, a new one, just to kind of help focus on it. And that's really, you know, it is really a good way to kind of connect and ground sometimes. So
yeah, I love that. I am a huge fan of like positive affirmations, but I think like also positive words we receive from others. I think like having like that text message or that message, because like, and like I print them off and put them on my wall in my office, because it's like when that like self-doubt comes in, it's like, okay, what is like truth others have spoken, and like let's put that kind of in the picture. And so the last topic I'm kind of gonna do, we get a lot of people in our like groups we've been doing talking about like, I feel like I have to do recovery perfect. And I know in my journey, like recovery was not perfect. It was far from it. And I feel like that's kind of everyone's journey. And how do you balance like not doing recovery perfectly? Because I don't think that's a possible thing. And also like not letting your eating disorder like use that as a way to like use behaviors and such. Sharon, I'm kicking this one off to you.
Solid. So I struggled with this a lot, especially in the beginning. And I think that oftentimes we find people, a common thing with people with eating disorders is the perfectionistic tendencies there. So, and like I alluded to earlier, I initially took the intuitive eating journey as my next diet. And so I was going to do it perfectly and align everything just right. And listen to my body perfectly. And that's just not realistic. And also, I feel like if I see when I was, okay, so there was a point in my recovery where I was like, yeah, everything's great. I was totally in treatment. Everything wasn't great. But I had this like really great, like everything's perfect face. And my therapist, was like, her name was Hannah. And she told me, first of all, that, I needed to not only be an advocate for eating disorder recovery in general, but be an advocate for my own. And also this whole perfectionistic, persona that I was putting on, like everything was absolutely perfect. wasn't helping anyone and I wasn't fooling anyone except myself. And so allowing myself to be in the mess and allowing myself to like be okay with the fact that it's not perfect and it's a long, hard, messy process. And it can feel so, sometimes it can feel discouraging because I've been going so long, so hard, and why am I still struggling? Why do I still have fear foods? Why do I still have what have you? And the other day I was on the COVID-19 eating support group Instagram live thing that they have going right now every hour, about a month ago. And someone said recovery is like a spiral staircase. Sometimes the view looks the same, but you can't undo what you've already learned. Like you've already made this progress up the stairs and it may seem the same, but it's not. And I've learned so much and I'm building upon it. So those little manageable steps, you know, and we're not going to be perfect at it. So.
Yeah, I love that staircase analogy. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Me too. I love that staircase thing too. I wish I heard it like years ago. I've only heard it like quite recently, and I'm like, where has this been all my life? You know, the question of how do you know when it's perfectionism, and how do you know when someone's using maybe, well, recovery is not perfect, to maybe enable the eating disorder, or that the eating disorder is using that concept, however someone likes to conceptualize their eating disorder. And if you look at it through the lens of shame, or that feeling that we're unworthy of love and belonging, those are both responses to shame. Perfectionism is a response to shame, and also fleeing or freezing, which I think is what's underneath that that continuation of the eating disorder behaviors, or that difficulty with interrupting them. That's all shame. And so I think getting to that feeling of unworthiness, and whenever those shame triggers are underneath both of those expressions of shame, or those shame shields, as I like to call them, it is really, really important for moving past it.
Yeah, definitely.
You should have gone last, Alice. That was a good one. I mean, I completely agree. You know, it isn't, you know, recovery is not a linear thing, journey. It is very messy. And I think in that mess, I think from all of my friends who are therapists and even learning, you know, it's like in that messiness where that growth also starts to happen, you know, and if you're feeling comfortable with your eating disorder, then that's, you know, like how do we move from that point to something that makes it feel like, okay, this is really hard and it's totally worth it. So
yeah, I love that, because it's such a hard journey. And I feel like one that, like, someone the other day was saying, they're like, when you fall down proudly. And I just loved that, because it's like I fell down so many times in my journey, and like, you know, but like you keep getting back up slowly but surely, and just like Sharon said, like taking the next, like, what can I do next? Like, what can I do next is like the next right thing, kind of. Y'all are all amazing. Thank you so much. I do want to kind of announce, I know Malak is already well aware of that, but today the Alliance and Southern Smash announced their Dare to Love Yourself Summit. It's going to be Sunday, September 13th, and it'll start at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it is just, we have the most phenomenal lineup. We're actually talking, when you were talking about, Sharon, about like health at every size, and like was it a thrift store that you went to? And like couldn't find anything. Like, we have a whole panel. Katie Serena, who started the company Mega Babe, which is now sold like in Target and stuff. Like, all these awesome people are talking about like how brands can be more inclusive, and like we just have a great lineup. So our Alliance Facebook page, Instagram, Southern Smashes pages all have ways to register. It's totally free. It's virtual. So everyone, please join that. And Malak is actually in it, which is very exciting. And so yes, so
I know
everyone join that.
Really cool.
It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I feel like if you haven't used Mega Babe's product, oh my God, she's like seriously saved my thighs. I don't even, God, that stuff is so good.
I adore her.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, thank you all so much for joining me, and
Thank you.
we are hoping to kind of continue this series as life goes on and everything. So I will see y'all here shortly.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank
Thank
you so
you.